Hey you 지금 뭐해 잠깐 밖으로 나올래 네가 보고 싶다고 거울 속에 난 So perfect 새로 산 신발도 Check it okay 잠든 도시를 깨워 late night 아우다우다 두근거려 거리마다 빛나는 spotlight 내게 가까워질 때 아우 내 입가에 미소가 번져 네 눈 속에 my eyes 떨려와 yeah 달콤하게 속삭인 내 감촉했던 내 맘은 Yeah it's you Doesn't matter 특별한 me and you 가까이 갈래 I want to 눈을 못 피하게 말도 못 돌리게 너만 좋다면 Doesn't matter 망설이지 말고 네 마음을 더 보여줘 네 손을 잡을래 너를 꼭 안을래 좋아해 널 내 맘은 I want you 기다리다 놓잖아 너도 알잖아 넌 special 원하는 건 딱 하나 모두 알잖아 다 티가 나는 걸 장난이 아니야 난 욕심이 생겼어 난 이대로 널 보낼 순 없어 아우 네 미소에 내 맘이 떨려 내 두볼의 red light 번져와 yeah 솔직하게 말해볼래 숨겨왔던 내 맘은 Yeah it's you Doesn't matter 특별한 me and you 가까이 갈래 I want to 눈을 못 피하게 말도 못 돌리게 너만 좋다면 Doesn't matter 망설이지 말고 네 마음을 더 보여줘 네 손을 잡을래 너를 꼭 안을래 세상 떨리는 내 손을 잡아줘 난 so special 매일 밤 기다린 지금 이 순간 You're the one that I needed 너 같다고 말해줘 이 밤이 끝나기 전에 Doesn't matter 시작해 me and you 느낌이 좋아 I got you 어떻게 너와 나 이렇게 가까이 널이 보여 Doesn't matter 주저하지 말고 네 두 발로 날 안아줘 어쩌면 너와 나 마주한 이 순간 좋아해 난 너만을 I want you
Right, that I think is working properly. Good. Welcome back, or welcome, or something. Where have I put my thing window? I think I'm saying something. I think I should be audible. So, let me reorganise things. Right, yes, now I can see what's going on. So, we had... yes. Yes, Simon, you're quite correct that Promise 9 did indeed start with 9 members, and not, as Pinkby suggests, 15. That would be a particularly terrible attrition rate. Even worse than Pixie have managed. Anyway, so where were we? We had just made 3 different attempts at... no, one of them got an acting career, mostly. So we had found 3 different ways of doing multiplication, where basically the stupider we got, the faster it got. in that I did something that involved just doing repeated addition, and that was fairly good. And then Simon suggested it worked out how to do shift and add despite not having, well, any of the things you might hope for. And that worked. He managed to explain the concept and then go home, and I was able to implement it from what he'd said. So that was pretty good.
And it would have worked great if the input numbers had been huge, but they weren't.
Presumably because the input numbers have to be small enough that even the naive approach doesn't take forever. And then I tried making it more stupid by taking advantage of the fact that the numbers were so small that we could actually unroll the loops entirely and not bother with loops at all.
I still think the reason there were 2 stacked memory nodes was because they had my solution.
Yeah, I think that's not entirely implausible. Just then they discovered that no one could find it, and thus when you made the tests hard enough that the clever approach was worthwhile, it made them so small. It made the naive approach far too slow. So anyway, now we get on to something quite exciting.
Something completely different.
Because we have a new piece of hardware. We have a display, which can do graphics. High resolution, but no, not high resolution graphics. So, message from Randy in the microcode of a broken processor. Back from the hospital, got a bunch of tests done. They don't anything wrong. Strange. I could have sworn I heard those. I brought this TIS reference manual with me to look at the image processing part again. It looks like compression, maybe. I still can't believe it's from. This thing was way ahead of its time. I mean, to be fair, the graphics subsystem looks pretty 1970s to me. But still. Fill the image buffer with the specified test pattern, which is entirely white. So that shouldn't be too hard. But I will have to read the manual because otherwise I'm going to not be able to remember how to drive the display. And while I suppose I could reverse engineer it. Right. So, where's the section in this manual on display? T31, no. Debugger, visualization module. Visualization modules features 5 colours because what? Black, dark grey, bright grey, white and red. 30 characters wide, 18 characters tall. So the image console sandbox contains a larger visualization module. What? Anyway, so the command sequences go 0, 0 is the top left corner of this display. You send X coordinate, Y coordinate, then a sequence of pixel values, and then a negative number to indicate the end of the string. So if we just want to fill the entire... Steph says, is it supposed to be greyer towards the left? Ooh, it is greyer towards the left. No. I don't know if it's supposed to be, but it definitely is on my screen as well.
I mean, it seems like the kind of thing they might do for atmospheric-ness.
Yes. I mean, they haven't mostly...
They're not stretching the graphics any other way. They might as well put the occasional effect on.
Right, so I think this should be fairly easy. We should just be able to go mauve, naught, down, mauve, naught, down, mauve, white, 3, down, jump L. Right, let's just spew out white until everything explodes. Let's see what happens then. Well, that's pretty good. Oh, it doesn't do line wrapping. Well, that's not very helpful. Right, we're going to have to be a bit cleverer then. So it's X and then Y, isn't it? Yes. So thus we have the slight problem that we really want to output the correct number of yes, we could do this with back, couldn't we? I bet we can fit this into one processor. We want to count up to whatever the number of columns is, 33. Well, okay, we want to count up to some number that's. I suppose we could just count up to 999, but I mean, that would be the minimum instructions solution, wouldn't it? That would still involve counting, though, so it doesn't help very much. So I think we do something like so we'll count down by going. Let's go mov ack down. Mov whatever the number was. 30. And then we do something like that in order to save our row counter in the back register. See if that works. Doesn't seem to work properly. What have I done wrong then? Because that sav should leave. That should do. Okay, well let's. So that correctly outputs tickety 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 tickety. I should have just reduced that 30 for the purpose of this test, shouldn't I? So yeah, I mean that looks pretty good. Oh, we need to send a terminating -1, of course, don't we, Stoats? Right. Yes, it does have a terrifyingly large number of nodes. I mean, if we assume that it's kind of reasonably portable, so say that many fitted into a meter cube, they're still quite big. I mean, still quite small, rather. By a cubic millimetre, and you get 1,000,000 into a meter cube. Is that right?
This ought to be playing the noise of a Spectrum loading a screen from the tape.
Yes. Right, I'm going to press the fast button because it's not going to change what it does in each test. Right. I mean, there is apparently a way to. I suppose yes, we can -F unroll loops, can't we, in order to make it faster at the expense of more instructions. But I think optimizing this one is probably not the way to go. All right, slightly different pattern. message from Randy, well, kind of from, dream about a tremendous circle of eyes pointed inwards at the of the world. Stranger and stranger dreams as I get older, or possibly as your brain gets infected by the TIS-100. Well, I mean, this should be much the same program as we had last time, shouldn't it?
I'm a bit suspicious that it's because the width is odd.
No, the width is even. Sorry, I may have been wrong about that. It's 30. Plus, you can tell that by looking at the target.
Yes. Sorry, what I mean is the width is such that it's not a matter of sending...
Just a matter of alternating ones and zeros. No, we have to alternate lines as well. But I think we can do essentially the same thing. Except maybe we can't fit all this in without a bit of extra cleverness. Yeah, okay, we can't quite fit it all in, can we? Also, like, we need to do the initialization again, and yeah, that's all just going to be a disaster. I mean, it starts off okay, but it'll comprehensively go wrong after that. So this means we're going to actually need to use two processors. So this one probably wants to just be able to output a line. So let's try doing it by this kind of approach. So I'll zero down, I've left down. So then so that's so that is a thing that will draw an alternating coloured line. Rather awkwardly, I can't even fit two copies of that into that processor, at least not with any control flow around it. So we can't just have this processor able to output two. Can't just have this processor able to output two lines and something else occasionally instruct it where to output those two lines. We can't have this one able to output one line and something else tell it which line to output, because the we can't even give it the ability to output both lines unless we engage in moderate amounts of silliness. So that suggests we want to have quite a bit of like organisation elsewhere. Kind of feels like what I want to do is have one processor responsible for generating the alternating black and white pattern, and another one responsible for generating coordinates, and this one responsible for merging them. Because both of those halves of the job are fairly simple. So that would be something like, well, we know the initial x coordinate's always going to be 0, so we can do that. So here my approach is that this processor will read from the one to the right until it gets a negative number, which indicates that the end of the sequence, at which point it then fetches another y coordinate from here. So this processor has life very simple. It goes right. That was easy. This one is a bit more complicated. I'm sure this can be done more efficiently. Oops. Well, that didn't work very well. Oh, this might help if might help if the loop initializer was outside the loop. That will work a lot better. Well, that appears to be working correctly, albeit that the code in the right processor is kind of ugly. Sure, there's some way we could sensibly have that right one skip one, or rather, yes, emit one extra 0 at the start on alternate loops. Yeah, I mean, like that's a bad solution by pretty much any metric. We have several metrics available, and they all say we're not doing very well. I mean, this one is slightly using its accumulator, but we could easily reduce the number of processors by 1 at the expense of extra code, admittedly. And that one, surely... no, that's not appropriate. Oh well, now I'm going to go on to the next puzzle because
I'm going to use that step comment as a CPM rather than a CP/mer. I don't know what
Yes.
CP/mer is. If you get someone who uses CPM, whatever that is, then I don't care.
so exposure mask viewer. Now something that involves actually playing with our input in order to generate some output, which is going to be much more fun. We process a signal of. It is a bridge device, partly from a world and partly from the other, designed to see the signal.
It's a bit Matrix.
So, read an X value from in, read a Y value from in, read a width value from in, read a height value from in. Draw a rectangle of that size at the specified location. Yeah, this is where it gets entertaining, as I recall. So obviously we have to keep track of where our cursor is in terms of moving it down one row to draw the rectangle. And then we need something else that handles the widthness, and something that kind of handles the heightness. So I can vaguely remember the kinds of things that I've done for this, which involve essentially having something gradually convert the input format closer and closer to the output format we want. So we do something like, first we replace a definition of a rectangle with a definition of each of the lines in the rectangle independently, and then we have something that expands those lines into the actual sequence that the display system wants. So that is only slightly fiddly because, of course, we only have a couple of registers and we have 4 variables. And we kind of need quite a lot of information here, don't we? Because we need... So if we're going to convert this into individual lines of the rectangle, each line needs to come with x coordinate, y coordinate, and length, i.e. width of the rectangle. And the x and width variables are going to be constant throughout. But the y and the y variable is going to be varying and will emit multiple lines per rectangle. So that means we could, for instance, keep the width in the y position in ACK, but then we also need a counter that tells us when we need something that counts down number of rows and something that counts up the current y coordinate. Although we can, of course, draw the rectangle backwards if that's simpler. As in, we could start at the bottom row and decrement y, but still we don't actually want to do anything when it gets to 0. We could have a different processor responsible for adjusting the y value afterwards.
I'm confused. Does Jacob want to have things starting with M or not starting with M then? What?
I presume not.
Okay, so what he wants. What? Confused.
Big iron. which is admittedly 2 words, but so yes. So if we say suppose we can do a kind of my usual dispatch table thing, can't we? We could go have 1 followed by 3 coordinates indicates the start of a rectangle. And then something else, use 9 as a placeholder. Something else that means draw 1 row of the current rectangle. So there we have now decoded. We now have 2 commands, one of which sends the initial data, and the other one of which sends 1 row of the rectangle. So what should this one do then?
Which you aptly proved is.
So this wants to maybe know how to emit a line, but there's so many numbers it has to remember. So probably what this wants to do is to sort out doing the inconvenient arithmetic. So let's have it so the x coordinate we need per line, and we're going, this processor is going to handle duplicating the x coordinate onto each line. The y coordinate we need to carefully save. We may not be able to do both the x coordinate and the y coordinate on each line. Maybe we actually need... Well, let's just see if we can fit everything in here, and if we can't, we split it further. We need to do something with the 3rd number. That's the width.
My vast for words, but it comes up with things like orbit, yo, jib, 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 jib. Rabbit, it, oi, jib, 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 jib.
The only word with an adequate number of jibs in it is jib.
Yo, tyro bait, jib, 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 jib. You're going to have to face it, Gareth. You've been jibbed. I definitely have been jibbed.
So no, I think I'm trying to run rather before I can walk here.
The Spectrum never had a walk command.
So instead,
I thought Wall-E was a film. What? It's not. Film subtypography?
yes.
Oh, I see. I took it to be like a programming language. He was writing something in. Okay, fair enough. Hello.
So this then wants to... What's the minimum that this processor can do and still be better than its predecessor? I suppose what I could have it do first is be precisely as good as its predecessor, and then see how much better I can fit in making it. But that might involve like a bit of faff.
Well, that's us told.
So that does nothing at all, as in that just copies through 3 bytes when it receives a 1 and 1 byte when it receives a 4, which is of no use at all. So let's have it do something slightly more useful. Well, one thing that we need to do is to add the y coordinate to the height counter. So we could do that. So the y coordinate is that value. Maybe we don't need to pass it on, but let's leave that in there for now. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then instead of just moving the thing down, the y coordinate of the row down, we instead go swoop, sav, add up, move, ag down. So this one just takes the x, y width and then a sequence of rows with their relative y coordinate and converts that into x, y width and a sequence of absolute y coordinates. But actually it doesn't now need to send y of the rectangle because it's now incorporated that into the stream of things it sends out. So that's kind of an advance. It's already using both of its registers, so that's probably about as much as we can fit in that processor. Actually, I'm going to switch that to moving right instead. Right.
Yes, you're right.
Right. So now that's producing a sequence or producing x width and then a sequence of rows, each of which comes with a y coordinate. Okay, each of which is a y coordinate. So we might actually be able to do most of the rest of the work in here. So following our usual procedure, we don't need that jump 0 at the end. Right. Oh yes, we probably do, on the other hand, need to actually send some commands to the right. So what are our commands? There's probably basically what we had before, aren't they? Mov1 right. That's now 7. And this one similarly wants to be mov some large number, which we will sort out later. Set that to 7. So what can we do given we have x and width? So it seems like we want to do something like mov. So we're going to need to remember the x coordinate and use that on each loop. And we can't remember x and width and do a counter of width because that would need 3 registers. So I think this one has the incredibly trivial job of duplicating that x coordinate onto each row. And duplicating the width onto each row, yes. So this then when it receives a row, which will come in as an absolute y coordinate, it should pass downwards x, then y, then width. So x is in the accumulator at this point. Y is in back, so we swap x and y next, so that comes from left. Then move width and then swap back again and then go back to the start, right? So this processor now emits x, y, width for each line in any rectangle. So then, if we're lucky, this one can then assemble that into an actual, not escape sequence because there is no escape, but into a command sequence for the display processor. So it receives x, which it just passes on. It receives y, which it just passes on. It receives width, which it moves into the accumulator. It then makes the brave assumption that width is non-zero. And repeatedly emits 3 until the accumulator is 0. And then it sends a -1 to finish the row.
Was the ferret file the house before Milton Road's general whiffing?
And Milton Road itself. Right. Okay, that apparently didn't work correctly. in that we've stopped having reached the end, but we haven't been told we've been successful. Everything is one row lower than it should be.
So it is.
I mean, the fact that I'm starting at the wrong end of each rectangle, because that seems simpler, is probably partly what the problem is here. That'll fix it. I've just stuck a sub 1 in an appropriate place. I can probably fix the fix things so that it does things a bit more sensibly. Actually, yes, that can be done much more simply, can't it? Really, your 1970s debugger should not have an undo key. But actually, if I just swap the sub 1 and mov ac down there, that will probably do the job as well.